Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
First on is titled, She Got the Longer Tanning Session She Wanted. At least she apologized and didn't ask for a refund. When I was 17, I started my first job in a tanning salon. Believe it or not, in some states, tanning salons are considered a medical facility, so we have to keep a strict record of our customers' sessions. Where I live, we are required by the FDA to check people in using a form of government ID, usually just a driver's license. I was about 3 months into the job when we had a very lovely woman, Patricia, stop in hopes of preparing for her upcoming trip to the Maldives. I chatted with her a bit and politely let her know that I will need to see her ID in order to get her account set up. Patricia scoffed at me and said that's a violation of her privacy, and she doesn't have to provide me with any sort of identification. I assured her it's an FDA requirement, and we can be fined hundreds of dollars if we do not see her ID, so, unfortunately, we would have to refuse her service if she is unable to provide it. Patricia rolled her eyes and said that's a crock of crap, but begrudgingly complied and rudely tossed her license across the counter at me. I kept a smile on my face nonetheless. After that, we have customers sign a consent and waiver that outlines the risks of tanning, i.e. burning and/or skin cancer, and also has the guest complete a skin tone chart so that the sales associate can get a good idea of how much time to recommend. I glanced over her chart, and she had written that she was of Northern European descent, so naturally, I recommended a very low amount of time, seeing as she was likely to burn easily. Patricia scoffed at me again and said that I have no idea what I am talking about. She said she is leaving for the Maldives in 3 days, so she needs to go for the max amount of time, 15 minutes. I said I strongly advise against that, seeing as 15 minutes in a tanning bed is a lot stronger than just 15 minutes in the sun. Patricia insisted that I was wrong and mumbled about the dumb bimbos that tanning salons always hire. I politely let her know that we are trained to suggest the safest amount of time for customers, and she almost certainly will burn. She brushed me off again, said she knows what she is doing and demanded the full time. I mustered up my best customer service voice and said, "Okay, 15 minutes it is. Let me walk you back to your room." After the session was over, Patricia took almost 25 minutes to leave the room. She sheepishly opened the door and gathered her things. Her face was as red as a tomato and her body was pink all over, meaning that by tomorrow she would be a peeling lobster who would likely need to avoid the sun for several days. She actually apologized for not taking my advice and asked if we had anything available for burn relief. I happily sold her a bottle of RX aloe vera and wished her a great vacation. Next one is titled, Complain About a Deaf Customer, Get a Longer Wait Time. About 12 years ago when I used to work at a pharmacy as a tech, a middle-aged deaf woman came in for a refill, so she and I communicated by written notes. As she and I are writing notes back and forth to each other, a douchebag walks up talking on the cell phone and proceeds to complain about this woman to the other person on the phone. He was a truly hateful prick about it and was so obnoxious. Needless to say, I personally filled her prescriptions and had her out the door in less than 5 minutes. However, for some inexplicable reason, his prescription kept getting sent to the end of the line never to be filled. After about 30 minutes, he asks to speak to my boss and complains about it taking so long. It was one of the busiest pharmacies in Kansas City, but tons of people that came in after him were getting their meds and leaving. My boss calms him down by telling him that his script would be next and walks over to me and says, "What's the deal here? Why do you keep moving his stuff to the back of the line?" I straight up told my boss what the douchebag was doing and that it really upset me. My boss, a really cool guy, says, "Right on," then kept the a-hole waiting another half hour. Next one is titled, They Got Multiple Tickets for Parking in a No Parking Zone. I'm moving out of my apartment this week and I rented one of those curbside drop-off, pick-up moving crates. My city requires that you get a permit for the street, $40, and provides no parking signs so the crate can be loaded and unloaded. I hung the no parking signs along my designated space well before the crate arrived. Lo and behold, some student with out-of-state plates parks in my space. I call the cops and they ticket the car. After my crate arrives, the car returns and parks again in the no parking zone. At the same time, a landscaping company sets up a no parking zone overlapping my zone. Now there are multiple no parking signs tacked up by the offending car. The landscapers are angry, as the car is in their way, so we hatch a plan together. Since we both have permits for no parking zones, we both call the cops separately. The offending car ends up with several more tickets. Additionally, I flag down a meter maid and let them know that the car has been in the spot for more than 2 hours, the limit for non-residents. Another $40 ticket. By the end of the day, this dumb student had 5 tickets on his windshield. No parking means no parking. Next one is titled, "You Want a Bottle of Wine?" Here, let me know how that goes for you. I work at a small Chinese restaurant that generally only has locals and regulars with the odd visit from out of the area. Because it's so small on a normal day or night, we will only have one waitress on a shift. We were having a relatively quiet night, so I was sitting around pouring soy sauce into bottles and cleaning chili jars. This table of 4 people walk in and they're all relatively nice, and I give them the good old casual greeting and sit them down. They do their stuff and order their meal, and for drinks, they only get table water, which is normal. When I bring out their food, the old man, henceforth asked for a bottle of the red wine. Now we don't serve alcohol, nor do we even have a bring your own bottle. I'm not yet 18, so I can't even handle alcohol if we did. I told him we don't have any alcohol, and he goes on this rage, pointing out a bottle that was on our shelf. I knew what he was pointing to. It was our Chinese vinegar. Now, these bottles look remarkably like Asian alcohol. They're green with red on it and all the writing is in Chinese. And I told him that, "Sir, that's vinegar, not wine." He went on an alcoholic rage, yelling about how I couldn't know what alcohol was cause I was underage and how I was hiding alcohol from him, and he would make a complaint on our Facebook page. His children and wife look embarrassed and are trying to hide themselves, and his wife gives me a look that just says, "Do it and he'll regret it." So I went and got a bottle of the vinegar and put it on the table. Makes a really big deal out of it, saying crap like, "A hole wasn't that easy, waitresses in my day would have done it in 2 seconds." I walk away, and when I turn around to check, he'd spat a mouthful of vinegar out and onto the plate and was trying to wash out the taste of Chinese vinegar with water. To be fair, the wife did come up to me later and apologize for his idiocy. They never made that Facebook post, and paid $20 for the bottle since we couldn't use it again. Next one is titled, "I made it clear to everyone in the store he rented an embarrassing movie." He could have just given him a snotty attitude, but no, he killed him with kindness before exposing his choice of movie to everyone, including children. Working at Blockbuster, circa 2003. When checking people out, there were 2 things you're supposed to do. 1. Read the titles of the movies and give the due dates. 2. Tell people to have a nice day, night after handing them their movies on the other side of the security gate. So, a guy comes in with his 2 kids on a busy Friday night. He has a few children's titles and an adult flick. I ring up the videos and tell him the due dates of the kid movies and say, "The other one is due," trying to save him a little embarrassment. I walk over to the security gate to hand him the videos where I'm planning on telling him to have a good night, but he's still at the register. Confused, I look at him and he says, "Aren't you forgetting something?" I think through the Blockbuster process and can't come up with anything. He has an indignant look on his face and says, "You're supposed to tell me to have a good night." I'm pretty stunned that a grown man is so reliant on the good wishes of an 18-year-old, especially since I would have given him what he so desperately needed if he'd walked over to the security gate. So, I say, "Sir, I'm so sorry. Have a great night. I hope you enjoy your copy of." I look down at his VHS tape, then look at everyone behind him in line and raise my voice, "Married people, single sex." He turns bright red, and the lady behind him covers her face. I sorta feel bad for his kids getting caught in the crossfire, but there are always casualties in war. Next one is titled, "Harass your fellow employees. You won't get away with it much longer." A few years ago, I was working in a job I really enjoyed with a team I really get well with. There were about 5 of us working on the same portfolio of projects in different roles, and every single team member was just cream of the crop, incredibly good at what they do. I can't overemphasize how satisfying it was to work with such an incredibly competent, likable group of people. In this job, instead of getting the Sunday night blues, I would get excited thinking about the work I would be doing the next day and planning how we would solve complex problems together. The one downside, there's always a downside, to this job was Steve. Steve was not in the supervisory line for me or any of my team members, but he was about 3 levels above us and very senior. He'd been there for years and was tight with senior leadership. Steve was also a mega creep. He said extremely inappropriate things to young women in the office, and he apparently wasn't averse to being handsy, though as far as anyone knew, that was as bad as it had gotten. The women in the office all knew to steer clear of him. My first week on the job, the Whisper Network made sure I knew, never be alone with Steve. Sexual harassment is difficult to document, and no one wanted to risk their career and put a target on their back going after a big guy like Steve, so he just got away with it for years. So for a couple of years, I followed this advice. There were a few instances of Steve saying incredibly uncomfortable things to me in passing, but for the most part, I managed to avoid him. Then I found out that my teammate Rob had gotten on Steve's radar. For context, Rob is non-neurotypical and has some minor tic-ish behavior. He's also shy and easily spirals into social anxiety when put in uncomfortable situations. So one evening at our team's informal weekly happy hour after work, Rob lets it slip that Steve's been giving him a hard time. The rest of us are like, whoa, wait, what? Because Steve never interacts with staff at our level, except to creep on women, so we make Rob tell us everything. Basically, for the last few weeks, Steve has been bullying Rob, making fun of his tics, and mimicking his way of speaking back to him. He's also been asking Rob how he can possibly be competent to do his job and implying he's a pity hire. Steve even called him a retard. It's clear Steve is seeking out Rob for this, because, again, there's really no reason for him to interact with our team. Rob has been having horrible anxiety over this situation and has had bad insomnia and stomach issues since Steve started targeting him. And not that it bears repeating, but just to reiterate, Rob is a beast at his job. And a genuinely good guy. At this point, I'm seeing red. We all were. We tell Rob to go to HR, that his neurological issues put him in a protected AITA class, that he could get Steve in big trouble. Rob panics and says he can't do that, begs us not to tell anyone at work, and says he wishes he hadn't said anything. We assure him we won't say anything if that's what he wants, but we're all very distressed. I leave the bar fuming, just thinking, okay, that's it. Duck you, Steve. You're going down. I can't tell anyone about what's happening to Rob because I promised him as much, so I start my own paper trail. I start baiting Steve. And I don't mean I behave in any suggestive manner or lead him on, I just stop avoiding him, and I even initiate contact myself. I IM him through the company's IM system very professionally, politely asking if a big client will be staying on through the next project cycle, and the floodgates open. He starts sending me outrageously sexual IMs. I mostly don't respond, but I occasionally keep him going by sending extremely literal responses to his innuendo-laden questions or pretending not to understand something suggestive he's saying. Sometimes when he clarifies, I'll outright say, "This isn't appropriate," or "This is making me uncomfortable," or "Please don't say things like that, Steve," but he steamrolls right over me. During this time, I've also been seeing him more in person around the office, and he often says gross stuff to me in person as well, a lot of it not just inappropriate, but bizarre and nonsensical. Is it legal to have a butt like that in that skirt? Every time this happens, I immediately go back to my desk and write down what he said, the date and time, and the names of any witnesses. After about a month of this, I compile my creep journal with printouts of the IM conversations and take them to my HR rep. I ask to file a sexual harassment complaint against Steve. As soon as the words "sexual harassment" leave my mouth, my rep instantly gets the head of HR and 2 other reps, and they go through my evidence with me and ask me a ton of questions. The head of HR assures me they'll take my complaints very seriously, and asks if I know of any women around the office who have had similar issues with Steve. I'm able to give them several names. They send me on my way, and 2 weeks later, my rep formally reaches out to me and lets me know Steve has been let go. Much jubilation is had around the office. It took a couple of months for me to piece together the whole story, but basically, after my complaint, HR started following up with the names I gave them, both the witnesses to my in-person encounters with Steve and the other women he'd harassed. They corroborated what I'd told HR, and then through them, word started spreading around the office that HR was conducting a sexual harassment investigation against Steve. This emboldened at least 15 different women who'd been biting their tongues about Steve for ages to come forward and tell their own Steve stories. The worst story was from a junior staff member who Steve had sexually assaulted at a company party the year prior. During all of this, IT had been asked to go through Steve's emails and IMs, and this had not only been used to validate my printouts as legitimate, but IT had found a ton of additional incriminating stuff in Steve's correspondences. Somewhat frustrating, Steve received an extremely generous severance package as part of his termination. But on the bright side, word got around the industry quickly, and Steve was poison at that point. No company would touch him with a 10-foot pole. The last time I thought to snoop on his public social media pages, he was listing himself as an independent consultant in our industry, which I seriously doubt he's actually doing, and based on his public Facebook page, he's doing a couple of MLMs, so that should kill off whatever savings he has in short order. I don't work with Rob anymore, but I did recently attend his wedding. He's extremely happy with his new wife, who is a sweet and lovely woman, and he's doing really well in his career. Last one is titled, "Insist on Making Subpar Ice Cream? Not After I'm Done with It." For the past 10 years, I have been working back of house in fine dining restaurants. I love learning, and I love all things about food. Because of this, I've had a variety of positions in many establishments, learning a pretty diverse set of skills. I've baked bread and been a line dog, pastry chef, sous chef, executive chef, all the things. So 6 months ago, I decided I wanted to try something different and begin to enjoy my life. I didn't want where I worked to define me anymore because I'm a human and I have other things that I enjoy. So I accepted a position at a small local dairy and began to learn cheese making. It's been great. I have been able to work on my house, garden, and spend so much time with my dogs. But admittedly, I do miss the kitchen, and so I agreed 2 months ago to help out a few ex-co-workers who are the respective chef and sous chef at a new restaurant with a pretty cool concept. In the spirit of trying to maintain my new relaxed life, I agreed to only work 2 days a week. Now a week in, my new boss, Le Chef, asks me to please make some ice cream, following his recipe. He'd made a small batch already and gave me a bite to try. He said, "It's a bit hard, but I think that's just because of the temp of the freezer." I took a bite, and while the flavor was nice, the texture was off. Hard, icy, and chalky. He gave me his recipe and I could immediately spot the problem. For those who haven't made a lot of ice cream, there are a few things that make really great ice cream. Yolks, sugar, fat, air. Yolks are tempered in and help bind the sugar, liquid, fat together. The sugar content helps lower the freezing point of the mix, preventing it from freezing into a solid block. As it's churning, air is added to the base and the yolks help hold that air in place, making the ice cream lighter. They also add fat and make for really rich ice cream. Commercial ice creams often skimp on the yolks and use stabilizers to help hold the air inside the ice cream. This specific recipe had only 4 yolks and 110 grams of sugar per quart of liquid milk cream mix. A pretty standard recipe would have at least 6 yolks and 250 grams sugar. I tried to point this out to Le Chef, also pointing out that his ice cream machine was a 2-quart gelato spinner that inherently spins slower and therefore incorporates less air. I offered to troubleshoot the base and make a few test batches so we could really bring this ice cream home. Le Chef gives me a funny look, says the recipe is fine and instructs me to make a large batch of it, so I do. The following week Le Chef asks me to work on a new flavor of ice cream and to just use his base recipe and add flavor until it's right. I'm kind of sick of watching the poor girl who has to scoop the ice cream struggle with a rock at this point, and also annoyed that the ice cream I made a week prior is hard, icy, chalky. So I decided to just ignore him and make a base that I know will be killer. The next day we spin it up, and it is luxurious. Smooth, creamy, all the things. The owner of the restaurant makes a comment about how fantastic it is. I explained to a fellow co-worker, Sue, what I changed, and I guess he tried to tell Le Chef that I had made some adjustments, but Le Chef refuses to believe him. In the meantime, Le Chef makes more ice cream base, and they continue to come out crappy. A mutual co-worker tells me Le Chef is getting upset that he can't make ice cream as nice as I can, and still refuses to ask me why. I try to explain ice cream science to him the next day, and am met with a wall of knowledge. 4 yolks are fine, and the freezer is too cold. At this point, I am frustrated, because I think learning and sharing is key to everyone's success. A better product makes for happier customers. I also don't want to make anything that is crappy and have Le Chef be able to say that I am the responsible party. So I go full revenge. I begin to use my favorite ice cream recipe, which calls for a whopping 12 yolks per quart. I add a splash of appropriate liquor, and sub out some of the sugar for an inverted sugar, all done super low key. I don't tell anyone, and the results are ridiculously good. According to a mutual co-worker, it's been driving Le Chef crazy. But until he decides to man up and ask for a mini lesson on ice cream science, I'm just gonna keep improving his recipes on the down low and enjoy laughing about it to myself on my ride home. Thanks for listening.